Sajay, I'm going to give you an award for the most persistent follow-ups on a PR to this group.
Ah. See, I think that's the point, right? If it's really important, people do follow up. Otherwise, kind of like just loses track.
I like it. Need more awards being given out.
Hey, y'all. Hey. Hey there.
That's
Hey.
someone typing really fast, or is that just interference? Okay, it was interference.
It might have been me typing. I don't know. I forgot. Yeah, that was VBAT's super nerd keyboard. The fingers, they elongate out.
No, I hear a oscillating like audio signature as well that is not a keyboard. It's gone now. Wait, Nisha, unmute.
Unmuting.
Okay, it's gone now. All right, problem
Yeah.
solved.
Okay. So when do we all go to San Francisco to get our free cruise ride?
Oh, okay. Starting out early here, huh? Yeah, I mean, sign up on the list. I think it's pretty packed now, but yeah, put your name in and sign up. I think they're looking for people who live there. But you know, if you want a link, I can go find the link.
No, I saw Victor View's tweet. He took a ride, I guess.
Oh, he did. Oh, cool. Yeah,
he works there. So
yeah, he works on the I think the embedded systems team. So.
Oh wow.
Yep.
Okay. Can we get started?
Nisha's up first.
Yeah. So I want to start addressing section B. How do you call this? In the charter 6B, the TOB shall be responsible for adopting any policies related to the scope of the TOB and ensuring they are documented publicly. So I would like to start documenting TOB policies publicly, and I'm wondering if I should do that. Should I be submitting pull requests to this TOB repo? And also, where in the repo should I be submitting documentation on that? have I jumped the gun here and maybe ask the question, like, do folks here believe that the TOB policies have been sufficiently documented?
They probably are just insufficient policies. So I have no complaints with documenting things. And I think either the charter or the TOB repo itself would be fine places to iron out stuff like that. I know that at some point Rose had, wanted to see particular information around how do people become maintainers and this kind of thing. And we said that it's something that we need to work on. And I think that was something that was actually, I dropped the ball on. So if it's something like that, then I'm all for it. I just, hadn't done it myself. So like, if there's anything particular that's missing, yeah, absolutely open issues and take a first stab at it.
I think the TOB repo sounds fine. I don't think we have a particular place in it yet. I would say that probably my opinion is that unless it's actually a change to the rules in the charter, policies can be separate. And the reason for that is that the charter has specific requirements for amending it. And if we don't really need to amend the charter, we can avoid having to go through that whole voting process for everything.
Yeah, my only addition to that is, yeah, definitely, as we found out last year, it's not fun or easy to like do stuff with the charter. My only thought there is if someone did have the same passion and initial, drive that Alexa did, he kind of reorganized a ton of the charter. I think those PRs are still there. One of the things that makes these discussions tricky is like there's a bunch of things that we all agree and I think know are just stale about the charter. This other idea about the technical, oh boy, I can't even think of the term, the collection of maintainers of the specs.
TDC.
Yeah, TDC. So like there's a bunch of like outdated ideas and language that it also would be nice. I guess maybe it's separate from what you're talking about, Nisha, but I feel bad that like kind of Alexa's stuff has kind of fallen by the wayside. And again, it's not like there's any one person at fault. It's but I feel like that some of the things he was trying to clarify would help understand where the TOB even should or has kind of commitments to the projects versus the projects defining and organizing their own, like the specs. At least under the current charter, it seems like this idea of a TDC is where most like technical authority resided, unless there were just total blocked, discussions or issues. And that's really the TOB. I guess what I'm coming to is the TOB in the current charter has a fairly small role in the OCI. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'll stop rambling there, but.
So let's start with the top level question I have. Who has the ability to merge things into this repo according to the charter?
Yeah, if we're talking about the TOB repo, like I don't think the charter even has any specific language around that. But if we're saying we want to set policies for the TOB, then obviously we would want TOB like agreement on those things, which is fine to happen just at a PR level, in my opinion.
Okay. Let me just take a look real quick at any like pull requests that are open to this. So there are three pull requests, and two of them are submitted by Alexa. So if I know if I wanted to merge this, what is the procedure for it?
So the ones that are opened by Alexa are charter amendments, and the charter defines who needs to vote and what the voting is on charter amendments. So we can't merge them until that voting process has been met.
And we have the additional excitement there that the Linux Foundation has legal, staff who actually want to review and help with charter language. So even if we did all the votes, I think we'd be asked by the Linux Foundation to allow their legal staff to review and help draft language.
Seems to me that we also need some kind of operations documentation. Is that also policy, or is that just like how the TOB operates?
Yeah, I would agree with VBATs that, like, if we're just talking about things to help guide how we operate, like, that's outside the charter. And I think we can, there's nothing in this repo, and maybe that's step one, as to how things outside the charter are approved and merged in this particular repo. So, I think that's maybe up to us to kind of, with your help, maybe we can start to draft those things and agree on it.
That sounds like a plan. Start of next steps is to submit like a skeleton of what the operations would look like, and then start filling in every time we come across a question that says, how do we operate on when an issue comes up? How do we resolve an issue, or like how do we manage a particular task? So for example, once a charter amendment has been voted on, how do we get Linux Foundation's legal team involved, or even the fact that the Linux Foundation's legal team has oversight on charter amendments, and it's only after they say yay that we merge things.
I think it's worth writing that down. In practice, it's been Chris and Amy who've been facilitating that. So it just sort of informally, when there is something that needs to change in the charter, Chris and Amy have been helping with it. But that's certainly something that we can write down.
And Nisha, just in case you hadn't seen this, like, this is the last time, well, maybe the only time in the last several years that we've changed the charter a bit. And so this submitter is a lawyer with the Linux Foundation, and so he took like what we had started and made his own PR. So again, that's just I'm just giving that to you as an example of like the one time we've made a change in recent history.
Yeah, I recognize this. Speaking of documentation, what do y'all think about note taking and calling for note takers whenever we have these meetings? I see yes, yes, yes. Can we can we have a concession about that, saying that we get a note taker every time we ask for a note taker, or have call out for a note taker every time we have these meetings?
Nisha, are you talking about these weekly dev call meetings, which are not TOB meetings, or are you talking about TOB meetings?
Oh, these are both, I think.
So for the TOB meetings, we have meeting minutes that are in the TOB repo.
Okay, but I mean these weekly calls, because they things from these weekly calls don't get documented.
I think it's fair to assign someone the week before for next week, so you know you'll be there. On the Helm call, we do this like the last 2 minutes. Who's going to lead the meeting, and then who's going to do the notes for the next week. They also try to assign someone to triage issues, which people seem to duck out of. Everyone should kind of just be doing that. But it's helpful to have some like responsibilities there.
Okay,
I've seen other groups
so
just
I'm also note taking right now. That's why I'm asking. That's why I'm being quiet in the middle. Yeah, Brandon, that sounds like a plan. Is add a note taker field and have a triage call whenever it's needed.
Yeah, I've seen other groups just do it real quick at the very beginning of the meeting when they're saying, okay, everybody sign in, and can someone volunteer to take notes this round? That way, in case someone didn't show up, you're not scrambling. You're just always scrambling.
Okay, with that, I'll yield the floor. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nisha.
Sanjay, I think you're up.
Hello.
Is it Sajay who's up next?
Yeah, it's kind of like last week we agreed on getting the PR 111 merged and kind of making additions like typo mistakes or anything like that on top of that. Is there anything pending the blocking of the merge at this point, or?
Sorry, I'm here. I have no idea. I addressed a lot of people's concerns. One, Brandon, I think you had, or somebody asked about clarification on what the list of endpoints would look like. You probably just need some examples, but I think it's otherwise that's getting into nitpick territory. So if there's any other,
trying to sort out what the deal was at all.
Oh yeah. I'm not personally elated about having an array of endpoints, but I don't know if I said it in the doc or in the commit. I think I said it in the doc, but since any extension could have optional and could not implement an optional endpoint, then there's no other way, even if you see that it has the OCI endpoint or the OCI extension or whatever it is, that you wouldn't know it has certain endpoints implemented until you try it and get a 404 or 503 or whatever. But I think it's up for review and up for review by maintainers and mergeable at this point. So if anybody wants to go through it, I can't LGTM or NAC my own stuff. So
it goes a little bit to the, I think a comment, I'm forgetting who made it, maybe John, not sure. But just for the extensions directory list, are people really going to do that, or are they just going to go directly to whatever they're trying to query? And if it comes back forward,
Yeah.
they know the registry doesn't have it.
Exactly. I mean, like, and that's one of those little things of like, that becomes the rabbit hole conversation of is it really needed to have a framework for adding new things to the API, which is effectively adding any other PR for something that changes or updates or adds to the API at all. It doesn't have to happen in an extensions framework. But it's basically giving a namespace so that if you come to a registry and you see an AWS and ORAS or whatever, GCP and endpoint extension, that you could at least see like, oh, this is where to find the docs somewhere. That's all.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no,
so
the directory
arguably it's not none of this is needed. It's just kind of giving a safe guardrail for people to discover stuff. So
yeah, and I'm not complaining at all about the directory. It was just trying to sort out what that one field meant. And so in your vision of what that is that just going to be like a list of components?
It would be like, for at least until something gets added else in OCI, then you'd actually see like OCI / extension discover, like that string there.
So the whole string. Okay.
Effectively what the extension endpoint would be. So whatever the prefix is up to that point, effectively v2, then don't have to worry about all that, just the extension endpoint path. So that's fine.
Looks good to me then. So I don't have authority to do that. So take that
Yeah,
with a grain of salt.
that's fair. I think there's, looks like Stephen dropped off the call, but still a couple other people on the call can give it a once over.
Since we have time on the call, who can approve at this point?
One second.
Sound like the TOB question.
This is just a maintainers. Derek's on the call. John Johnson's on the call. Mike Brown is on the call. We have three people on the call besides myself who cannot.
And Steve has already given his approval, it looks like.
Huh? Yeah, Steve approved my last pushes to it. And Sajay. Sometimes I like uncomfortable silence because then it makes people get uneasy in their seats.
So do we want to call out the other two reviewers?
Huh?
One of whom is on the call? Put them in the hot seat.
John committed in chat to look at it. I think we're good.
This is
Yeah, I can take a look too. I just don't. I don't have a use case for this, and I don't see any issues with it. I'll take a look before the end of the week.
Okay. I just pinged all the maintainers as well. So, okay. Anything else pressing that's not on the agenda?
Not on the agenda, but is anybody here that's interested in like the reference type working group status? That's not already on the reference type working group.
Yeah, no, please do. I'm been trying to dial in, just a fly on the wall. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think all the credit on this one goes in, I think this Nisha's document originally, and we commandeered it and took it over and started throwing all kinds of stuff into it. So they went through the description of what everything is. And so this past meeting, we were starting to go through a bunch of the user stories of all the various requirements and starting to chug through those. So if people have thoughts for how they might want to use this or how they don't want to see it used or whatever, now is a good time to jump on in and kind of throw a comment in there. I can see if I can find a link to the chat. I can drop this over there for folks. Assuming that I can get to the chat. Okay.
I think it would be useful to show Josh's categorizing of it, because that's much easier to look at.
We only got partway through it this past time, but yeah, Josh, go ahead. I'll scroll down for you.
So yeah, so we were going through this on the call, and it appeared to me that everything kind of fell into a couple categories, primarily querying things. So I want to know things that are like, I want to discover things, or I want to store things. There are a few edge cases that, particularly there are a few things that Steve had, I had at the bottom that were more about the customer, like assurances for the customer. And then Nisha had a bunch of stuff about copying or grafting things from one registry to another, which I guess I don't, maybe Nisha, if you want to talk about how that is in relation to references, but I do think it's like either storing or querying. And
so the idea is to link a bunch of objects together. So in the event of copying from one registry to another, the objects do not get lost. That is the first one. The second one is in the event that objects, the links between these objects need to be broken or rearranged, then that should be allowed. Now, I feel like the second one is not really something that a registry should do, because it is like a directed acyclical graph thing. But to get around the rearranging, one can copy those objects over to another registry or another repo, like basically copy the objects and redo the links. So you create a new permutation of the linkage among those objects. Does that make sense, Josh, or anyone else?
It sort of makes sense. I guess my goal right now is just to make sure we can list these requirements. And so that's what the groupings were for. And I'm just trying to figure out if there's a way we can group these better. Who's sharing? Brandon, can you scroll up to the 3? Yeah, so there's this last one. I want the ability to automate. Maybe Nisha, this can switch to, I want to ensure that, and maybe, or I want to enforce that XYZ, and maybe we can reword some of these things to be sort of assurances that you won't lose things in a copy or things like that. And maybe that would fit some of Steve's things. I want to ensure that or enforce that. But another comment I had on the call is like, I think everyone is going to come in here with different requirements. And I think once we can list them, maybe we shoot to solve for X% of them, at least with the implementation.
How about manage them? That's like a very generic word for copy from one registry to another, modify linkages, modify links, arrange them, rearrange.
Yeah, one thing that occurred to me too is that we're kind of, these all sort of, the categories, when we did the conformance stuff, we broke down into categories, and maybe those 4, it was push, pull, discovery, and management. I think perhaps everything could fall into those, because if they're going to end up in distribution spec, if changes will end up in distribution spec either way, they will fall into those categories. So maybe that's a good idea. But I don't know if this is getting off topic from a status update or is just a continuation of the working group. So I'll let Brandon make the call.
I will keep my mouth shut until the next working group about this. But I agree, Josh. That's a good idea.
Okay.
And in terms of status, a lot of mine kind of came in completely off the wall, and that was mostly just me coming up with my ideas without looking at what was already written, so that I could keep my head not too focused down the path other people were trying to take me. And so might be useful for people in this group that have ideas that are completely off the wall, that haven't been thinking of how they would want to use reference types until now, to chime in if they have some ideas that are maybe non-traditional. Might help us think about how people would use these that weren't originally thinking of a signature and SBOM like we've been using in every one of our other examples. So throwing that out. And the link is in the chat there, and if it's not in the meeting minutes, we should probably make sure it's added. And now back to uncomfortable silence.
Sorry. It's good. Having a quiet day here, so that's fine. Thank you for that. Yeah, even just progress on a lot of those use cases is a grueling effort, but I think it's good ground being covered. So anything else from anybody? Right on. Let's yield 20 minutes back to people's day. Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you.